Hi, family, friends. This is Mark Tandle here in my home in Hartwick, New York. I often spend a lot of time watching reaction videos. This fella, JM's one of my favorite. This happened to be on my birthday. He did a special request. But this video is regarding my drum sets that are in my house. I've been asked about a few times on social media. This kit, I call it my little Raider rocker kit. It's got, what, I think there's 16 pieces here. And because I watch a lot of music videos, peace by the way, I sometimes will like to turn around and play drums along with them. Sometimes I'll use these bongos and conga sets with mallets. So this is, have another hit. This is another one of my kits, but now let's go. By the way, that's my tribute to Clint Eastwood. Everything on that kit is exact, right down to the gun and holster and everything. And this over here, this is my tribute to Wyatt Earp and Lee Van Cleef's portrayal of Colonel Douglas Mortimer in the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, where Lee Van Cleef dressed just like his hero Wyatt Earp, which is in these pictures right here. The tall guy, that's Wyatt Earp, and his brothers Morgan, Virgil, and John Henry Holliday, otherwise known as Doc Holliday. So that's my little tribute to some heroes of mine. And but by the way, this is John Wayne. His hero is also Wyatt Earp. In fact, he said every time he walked on a movie set, he imagined himself as Wyatt Earp. So, but this video is about drums in my house. So most people, I ask them to go by through this Raider drape, and they see this, and they usually say something like, you know, oh my. Initially, I'll start over here on this south wall. This set I call Santana. It occurred to me one time that A through G, there's, let me remove some of these sticks, 'cause they're going to make a lot of racket if I hit the drums. So it occurred to me that A through G, you have like 7 notes. So I thought, well, what happens if I was to buy and put together 14 separate, individually tuned drums? So you can actually play melodies on this kit instead of just a rhythm pattern. In fact, there's so many of them that 2 people can stand here side by side and play basically. That becomes a melody, and if the guy over here wants to play basically the same thing, you know, you can play in harmony with each other. You gotta have your, those are more high-pitched toms. They're snares, by the way. These are all snares if I bother to turn them on. This is my tribute to John Lennon and the Beatles. And I made these plaques in high school, 1970. Cut out of a Rolling Stone magazine, and a couple pieces of wood, and a burner and a file in my wood shop. First Pink Floyd concert I ever bought. Seen them 4 times now. So I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and that's Quicksilver Messenger Service, fresh air in the background. Here's something I kind of invented one day. I call it my cymbal tree, a 6. 8, 10, 12, 14, 16-inch cymbals. There's also a hi-hat right here. And 4 cowbells. Wood blocks. Claves. A few other cymbals. There's a xylophone, some chimes and triangles, and a kick bass. My grandson Gavin always comes over and loves to play that xylophone. Well, I threw a bunch of sticks down on the floor, but this here's what I call my favorite seat in the house, and this drum kit, I call it 8-ball because the front of that kick bass got an 8-ball on it. But basically this thing has 4 snare drums. I leave the snares off so they don't have a lot of over rattle. But there's 2 10-inches, one right there, one right here, 2 12s, one right there, and then one on the other side, and 2 14s basically right there. There's 6 cowbells on this thing, so whichever direction I'm facing, I basically have a cowbell and a snare drum, and there's 2 hi-hats, one with triangles and one without. And then there's chimes, and I believe I think there's a total of maybe 18 various cymbals on this thing with you know, crash, rise, splash, and I like to put them. Let me actually grab a stick and demonstrate something with just one hand. I like to put the cymbals right over the top of the drum so I can do things like, you know, and hit both of them at the same time. And these two over here, they have, all my heads are Evans heads. Most of them are the double coated G2s that I really like a lot. And these two, they have a deeper barrel tone. The rest of them are all muted, and if I can recall this correctly, it's so that's this one. Then over here, that one, this one. And there's 3 claves, a wood block, and as far as I know, this is the first and only drum kit on the planet that actually has a planter's mixed nut can for an accent piece. If I had 2 sticks, I'd be showing off what these all sound like. So, and one last thing I'll show you sitting here is I've been to, gosh, nearly 300 concerts, and all my favorite drummers have double kicks. And I noticed that most of them all sound the same, you know, both drums sound the same. So what I did is I put double pedals on my right kick, and they sound the same. But my left kick over here, it's got its own separate pedal. I can play both of them at the same time. But this one here is intentionally pitched much higher with a bang, and so it's a bang and a boom boom, so I can play the beat and the tempo. Very distinctive difference. And boy, I tell you what, if I put this foot over here and playing, I can make a hell of a lot of noise with those kick basses. So, on to another section of my drum kits in this room. By the way, there are 36 electric guitars in this room of assorted brands and famous. By the way, within my entire, I think it's 168 pieces of drum equipment in my house, Virtually every major brand is represented here. I mean, you name it, at least one piece is here. That big 18-inch, that's Italia. Most of this is Pearl. Some of it's, well, it doesn't matter. Mapex, Sonar, Yamaha, so many. They're all here. And virtually all the cymbal companies I could think of are represented here too, including this vintage German-made Avante Rye. That thing sounds sweet. Speaking of sounding sweet, that's my mother in 1964 was the person working at Rickenbacker who handmade John Lennon's one-of-a-kind custom 325. And 50 years later, I was able to buy in 2014 an exact copy without an F-hole. For years, Rickenbacker made what they called the John Lennon Special, but it had an F-hole in it. So finally, 2014 50th year commemorative they made, and I heard about it and I called around and nobody had one, except somebody told me call the Guitar Center in Hollywood, California, if anybody knew about it. Would be a fellow there named Alan. So I called and Alan said, yeah, we have the only one in the country. It's locked up in our platinum vault. And I said, well, I need to buy it. And he said, well, you and a lot of other people. So I told him the story about how my mother made that guitar in detail, and he made sure I got that guitar. He actually took $500 off their asking price. Right now it's worth about $7,000 on the market. That's Big Rick. That would be like the most classic bass guitar in classic rock history. You talk about John Entwistle, Chris Squire, gosh, everybody. Roger Waters, even Maurice Gibb, they all played a Rickenbacker. That's a Dean 12-string. The nicest, easiest playable, most beautiful sounding electric 12-string I've ever discovered. That's like a Paul McCartney bass. That's a Fender jazz bass. This set here is my Sunburst. Hey, who's that guy on your t-shirt? That must be Mr. Lennon. You gotta have a dobro, you gotta have a 3.5. And this would be my hand drum percussion setup. You gotta have your I think there's probably 6 different sets of bongos here, and congas, and Zimbabwe's, and there's several cowbells. So this setup here is a lot of fun to play either by hand or with mallets. So you get somebody going on this set, play some Santana music, or Quicksilver Messenger Service like this song, What About Me? And get 1 or 2 guys over there on what I call my Santana set. Get somebody who knows what they're doing, like my buddy Butch, pro drummer for over 50 years. Let him take a seat at 8-ball, and then get somebody else over here on the hand set. And then, just to add some more spice to the whole place, by the way, John Lennon, Bob Dylan, my 2 favorites of all time. My son played semi-pro football for 10 years. He's first string starting all-star wide receiver. This drum kit here, this is another little kit I have, but it's my Legend snare drums with 3 little toms added. This one here is a 1986 Sonar. That's a 1984 Slingerland. This is a 1978 Gretsch, and this fat sucker here, 10 lug, 6.5-inch deep Rogers, 1976 Rogers. So, and that's my concert hat that's been to, well, probably 30 concerts or so. and my little tribute to the instruments used by Pink Floyd and the Beatles, exact replicas of their famous guitars, and a little tribute to Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd, and what I call the twins, 2 SGs, 2 Les Pauls, 2 Telecasters, 2 Strats, a mini Strat, a mini Telecaster, and a hybrid Les Paul with a Telecaster hardware, and another. And by the way, I own 13 Greg Bennett custom designed guitars. What they did with Greg Bennett, they're made by Samick, the largest string guitar maker in the world. And Samick decided, well, we're so big we can cost effectively make guitars probably cheaper than anybody else, so let's make the highest quality. And they brought in Greg Bennett, a renowned guitar luthier, and they gave Greg Bennett, they gave him a Fender Strat, you know, a Telecaster, a Les Paul, an SG, and he said, what improvements would you make on these guitars? So he came up with the perfect head, the perfect tilt, the alignment of the strings, Grover locking heads, the way the body's constructed, the knobs are half an inch out wider away from everything so you're not constantly hitting them. The sustain on a Greg Bennett guitar is probably 20 to 22 seconds as opposed to 12 to 15 seconds on a typical Fender. So basically that's what Greg Bennett did with all these guitars. He made them better. This one here, that's a Greg Bennett Tiger Stripe. I think that thing is just beautiful. In fact, they all sound beautiful. So, and you gotta have a Fender Mustang. And these acoustic guitars, this thin line and this 12 string here, they all have their own electronics and equalizer, and so does this Dean 5-string bass. And just some of my collectability memorabilia stuff that goes back, like some of it my whole life. So, and that's what my room looks like basically. But that's Mark's drum ensemble. I called the whole thing Frankenstein because of its overall size. I believe there might be 168 pieces of drum equipment in this house. So that's my video for today. It's January 4th, I think, 2023. You all have a great, wonderful day. Peace out.